Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered today not just to speak, but to uncover what often remains unseen. Behind the smiles of many people walking beside us is a silent scream. A silent scream of someone who has survived emotional torment, confusion, and rejection at the hands of a narcissist. Their mannerisms may seem odd. Their reactions may confuse you. But these are not flaws, they are battle scars. And today we are going to expose what those scars look like, how they speak without words, and why they are a testament not to weakness, but to survival. When someone has been deeply hurt by a narcissist, the aftermath is not always visible in scars or bruises. Often, the trauma reveals itself through peculiar mannerisms, subtle, unexplainable behaviors that surface in day-to-day interactions. These behaviors can seem strange to the untrained eye, but they are evidence of a person who has lived through psychological warfare. Their entire emotional compass has been tampered with, and what you're seeing is the result of internal chaos being translated through body language and social cues. One of the most telling signs is how their natural self-expression becomes distorted. They don't always smile because they're happy, they smile because they're afraid. They don't always laugh because something is funny, they laugh because it's safer than being silent. These habits are not random, they are deeply rooted in the survival strategies developed during times of emotional captivity. See, narcissistic abuse doesn't start with loud explosions, it begins quietly. It begins with subtle insults disguised as jokes, with boundaries being violated slowly then consistently. Over time, the victim stops recognizing what is normal and what is not. Their sense of self starts to bend to fit the narcissist's expectations, just to avoid rejection or rage. And so what used to be natural expression gets replaced with filtered behavior, overcompensation, silence, constant scanning of the room. Their nervous system becomes trained to anticipate danger in the most ordinary moments. And this reprogramming, this conditioning starts manifesting in strange mannerisms. They might talk with an unusual tone, one that carries hesitancy even in safe environments. Their hands may fidget, their posture may be closed off. Their eyes may wander or look down, avoiding eye contact even when speaking truthfully. These are not simply character traits. These are signs of someone who has been punished for being themselves for far too long. And when someone is punished for who they are, they begin to hide not just from others, but from themselves. Over time, the suppression of emotion becomes the norm. The body holds what the heart can't release. So when the abuse ends, the body still remembers. And that memory leaks out in unpredictable ways. Startled reactions to loud sounds, smiling in uncomfortable conversations, or freezing when asked a simple question. They may suddenly go quiet during conflict or overly explain things that don't require explanation. These actions are not irrational. They are deeply rational given the irrational environments they were shaped in. People often say, why don't they just act normal? Or why do they do that weird thing with their voice or their hands? But what they don't understand is that for someone who's been abused, normal became dangerous. The more authentic they were, the more they were criticized. The more expressive they were, the more they were gaslit. So they stopped expressing, stopped being bold, stopped being loud. They shrank to stay safe, and shrinking became a habit. Their voice might sound small, not because they are weak, but because they were silenced for so long. Their laughter might feel hollow, not because they're emotionless, but because they had to use humor to survive. Their smile might appear too white, not because they're fake, but because they learned that smiling diffused anger. These expressions are like armor. They protect, they deflect, they hide. But under that armor is someone who desperately wants to be seen without fear. Understanding these mannerisms is the first step in healing. Not just for the survivor, but for those who love them. They need space, not judgment. They need understanding, not correction. Because these behaviors are not permanent, they are protective. And protection can be released when safety is consistently present. As they begin to feel secure, their body starts to trust again. The tension loosens, the eyes lift, the voice strengthens. It is not instant. Healing is not a switch, it is a process. And in that process, the survivor learns to reintroduce themselves to the world without fear of punishment. If you've seen these behaviors in someone, show them grace. If you've seen them in yourself, show yourself patience. You are not broken, you adapted. And now, you are unlearning what no longer serves you. That nervous laughter, that constant apologizing, that hesitation to speak, it's not who you are. It's what you did to protect who you are. And the beautiful truth is this: what was once a survival mechanism can now become a stepping stone back to authenticity, back to peace, back to you. When someone has been emotionally, psychologically, or even spiritually manipulated by a narcissist, the impact doesn't simply fade away with time. The effects don't just vanish after the relationship ends. They become woven into the fabric of how that person functions in daily life. One of the most profound and consistent signs of long-term narcissistic abuse is hypervigilance and ever-alert, constantly scanning mindset that never truly turns off. It is not paranoia. It is a survival instinct that was developed in an environment where peace was unpredictable and love was conditional. Hypervigilance is not just being observant. It is being acutely aware of every facial expression, every tone shift, every pause in a sentence. It's reading between the lines, not because you're curious, but because you're conditioned to expect danger. It's walking into a room and immediately assessing who's in a bad mood, who's approachable, who's potentially a threat, all in a matter of seconds. It's a mental radar that never sleeps, scanning the atmosphere for emotional landmines, anticipating attack even when there's no war. This heightened alertness is born in the trenches of emotional warfare. In a relationship with a narcissist, the abused person walks on eggshells. They learn to read cues that others don't even notice, because one wrong move could mean silent treatment, public humiliation, rage, or gaslighting. They begin to live in a constant state of emotional tension, where their nervous system never truly relaxes. They become experts at predicting shifts in mood, deciphering passive-aggressive comments, and adjusting their behavior preemptively to avoid conflict. Even long after the narcissist is gone, the internal programming remains. The body and brain have been taught that safety is something that must be constantly earned, that stillness is suspicious, that comfort is fleeting. So the abused individual becomes like a soldier returning from battle physically out of the war zone, but mentally still at war. They may seem overly cautious, anxious in social settings, or overly concerned with how others perceive them. But this isn't insecurity, this is a remnant of survival mode. They may struggle in new relationships. A simple disagreement can trigger a fear of abandonment. A delayed text message can feel like rejection. A raised voice, even from someone who means no harm, can send their heart racing. This isn't drama. This is trauma. This is what happens when your sense of safety has been repeatedly dismantled by someone who weaponized your trust. What makes this even more tragic is that hypervigilance is often misunderstood. People see it as overreacting, being dramatic, or emotionally unstable. But few understand the depth of what this person has endured to become that way. They are not seeking attention, they are seeking stability. They are trying to feel safe in a world that once taught them safety was an illusion. They don't trust peace because peace was always followed by punishment. They don't believe in consistency because their past was filled with emotional whiplash. They are constantly reading the room because they've been conditioned to believe that any moment of vulnerability could be used against them. This isn't just a habit. It's a deeply embedded trauma response. And yet, within this hypervigilance is a beautiful truth. This person survived. They endured chaos and manipulation, and although their instincts were shaped by pain, those very instincts also protected them. Their mind stayed sharp. Their spirit stayed alert. Their heart remained hopeful, even in fear. And that speaks volumes about their resilience. But to heal, that hypervigilance must be addressed with grace. The goal is not to shame it, but to gently retrain it. The abused must learn that safety is not something to chase, it is something they deserve. That every person is not a threat. That calm does not always precede a storm. That they can finally put the radar down and rest. Healing happens when the abused begin to reintroduce themselves to safety, real, consistent, unmanipulated safety. It begins with setting boundaries, speaking their truth, and trusting their intuition again. It begins with understanding that their heightened alertness was never weakness, it was wisdom forged in fire. But wisdom, when healed, doesn't always need to be on high alert. It can become calm discernment, balanced awareness, and peaceful presence. So if you find yourself constantly overthinking, constantly preparing for conflict, constantly on edge, you are not broken. You are responding to what your soul had to endure. But now, it's time to believe that peace can be trusted. That love doesn't always come with strings. That you don't have to monitor every room you walk into. Because healing means learning how to be present without fear. It's time to stop surviving and start living. It's time to stop scanning for danger and start scanning for joy. It's time to let your heart exhale. You've been on alert long enough. Safety is not a reward, it is your birthright. And now you're finally free to claim it. Compulsive people-pleasing is one of the most subtle yet deeply damaging mannerisms found in those who have been abused by narcissists, it's often dismissed as kindness, politeness, or being a good person, but in reality, it is the fruit of fear, manipulation, and prolonged emotional subjugation. When someone has lived in a relationship where their value was constantly diminished, where their worth was always up for negotiation, and where love was given only when they perform correctly, they begin to equate peace with compliance. And that's where people-pleasing is born not from love, but from survival. A person who has endured narcissistic abuse learns quickly that to disagree is dangerous. They remember the explosive reactions when they voiced their own needs. They remember the silent treatment when they didn't comply. They remember being shamed, guilt-tripped, or ridiculed for expressing desires that didn't align with the narcissist's demands. Over time, the body and mind adapt. And that adaptation looks like smiles during disrespect, agreement in the face of insult, and silence during injustice. It looks like saying yes to avoid confrontation and I'm okay, even when drowning inside. This compulsive people-pleasing becomes deeply embedded in their identity. They no longer make decisions based on truth, preference, or conviction. They decide based on what will keep the peace, what will keep them liked, what will avoid conflict. This is why you'll often find these individuals going out of their way to do things they don't want to do. They'll say yes to social events they dread. They'll compliment people who hurt them. They'll take responsibility for things that were never theirs to fix. All because their nervous system still believes that their survival depends on keeping others happy, even if it costs them their own peace. Now, what makes this even more complex is that the world applauds people pleasers. They are called kind, giving, selfless. But behind closed doors, they are often exhausted, resentful, and lost. They don't know who they are anymore because their identity has become wrapped around being who others need them to be. And the narcissist exploits this at every turn. The narcissist conditions them to believe that their love must be earned, that their presence is a privilege, and that loyalty requires surrendering their own voice. So when the narcissist is gone, the pattern remains. These people will still find themselves laughing at jokes that hurt, saying sorry when they've done nothing wrong, and trying to rescue others at the expense of themselves. Not because they are weak, but because this is what emotional warfare has taught them. And even when they recognize this behavior, breaking the cycle feels terrifying. The moment they try to say no, they feel guilt. The moment they try to speak their mind, they feel fear. It's not because they don't want to change, it's because their body still remembers what it cost to speak up before. But change is possible. Healing begins with awareness. And awareness brings choice. You can begin to ask yourself, why am I saying yes right now? Is it from love or from fear? Is it because I want to or because I feel I have to? These questions begin to pull you out of the fog. They bring you into clarity. And from clarity, you can begin to rebuild your sense of self, not one that is shaped by fear of rejection, but one that is grounded in worth, truth, and self-respect. To the person who has spent years pleasing everyone but themselves, hear this truth. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to disappoint others in order to be honest with yourself. You are not born to be a mirror for others. Ego zoo, we're born to carry light. And light doesn't ask for permission to shine. It just shines. You may fear that setting boundaries will make people leave. And some will. But those who leave because you stop people-pleasing were never really there for you. They were there for the version of you that served them. And when that version dies, so will their loyalty. Let it happen. Because on the other side of your no is your freedom. You have lived long enough pretending that peace meant silence, that love meant sacrifice, that kindness meant surrender. But now it's time to walk into a new season where love is mutual, kindness is balanced, and peace is real. Where you don't have to shrink to be accepted or bend to be loved. You are not the sum of your compliance. You are the reflection of divine design. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have opinions. You are allowed to be fully authentically you. Let this truth wash over you. People-pleasing may have protected you once, but it no longer serves you now. It is safe to stop performing. It is safe to be real. It is safe to heal. And healing starts with telling yourself the truth even if your voice trembles, even if others walk away, even if you're scared. Because your peace is worth more than any performance. And the moment you stop pleasing others just to survive, you'll start living a life that's truly your own. When someone has endured emotional and psychological abuse from a narcissist, their speech patterns are often the first place the damage shows itself, even if no one else notices. The tongue, once free to express thought, becomes caged in fear. Not fear of speaking, but fear of saying the wrong thing, because once upon a time, every word was twisted, every sentence used as evidence against them. So now, they over-explain everything. They rehearse sentences in their head before they speak them. They explain things in layers, not because you don't understand, but because they've been trained to believe no one ever will. What looks like hesitation to others is really a deep-rooted conditioning to justify every action, every thought, every emotion. People who've been abused by narcissists have learned that clarity doesn't protect them. In fact, being clear, honest, or assertive usually backfired. They would try to express themselves in the relationship, this hurt me, or that's not what I meant, but instead of being heard, they were met with gaslighting, accusations, or mockery. So they started second-guessing their instincts. They began walking into conversations with a defensive posture, verbally and emotionally, already preparing for rejection or misinterpretation. And now, even in healthy environments, that pattern continues. Imagine someone trying to explain why they're 5 minutes late, not to a controlling partner, but to a friend who didn't even notice. Yet they're tripping over their words, nervously oversharing about the traffic, the coffee spill, the phone call, just to ensure they don't look irresponsible. This is not because they're careless or insecure. It's because once upon a time, small mistakes were treated like major betrayals. So their body still reacts like it's being cross-examined, even when no one is judging them. And every explanation is a shield they hope will protect them from conflict, even when no battle is present. This over-explaining can show up in professional settings too. They apologize while presenting a valid opinion. They preface their ideas with, "I'm not sure," or maybe it's just me, even when what they're saying is intelligent and correct. They've been made to feel that confidence equals arrogance, or that speaking up means being a problem. So their words are dipped in self-doubt, not because they lack clarity, but because they were taught their voice was dangerous. The other side of this is delayed speech. They pause before answering simple questions. They hesitate before expressing feelings. Not because they don't know the answer, but because they're scanning for possible threats. If I say this, will it be used against me? If I say what I truly feel, will I be mocked or punished? This delay is not indecisiveness, it is hyper-awareness developed in the presence of manipulation. It is the result of having your reality questioned so many times that now you question yourself even in truth. There is also a rhythm to their speech that reveals their past. It's cautious, sometimes too polite, sometimes robotic. The tone may shift mid-sentence as they assess the other person's reaction. They might mirror the energy in the room too closely, trying not to offend, trying not to stand out. That mirroring is not just social intelligence, it's survival intelligence. Because with a narcissist, every emotional response had to be calculated. Too sad, you're being dramatic. Too happy, you're inconsiderate. Too confident, you're full of yourself. And so they learn to neutralize their personality to maintain safety. All of this over-explaining, delayed responses, filtered emotions, these aren't just habits. They are remnants of psychological warfare. And yet many who carry them don't even realize it. They think they're just being thorough. They think they're being considerate. But in truth, they are still operating from trauma, responses that were meant to keep them safe in toxic conditions. Healing begins with awareness. When someone begins to notice these patterns in themselves, it's not to condemn but to understand. Why do I feel the need to explain myself all the time? Why do I shrink when I speak? Why do I ask permission to feel how I feel? These questions don't make you weak. They make you brave. Because facing the roots of these behaviors requires courage to admit that something broke you. And humility to accept that you're allowed to rebuild. And rebuilding doesn't mean becoming who you were before the abuse. It means becoming someone stronger, someone wiser, someone free. Free to speak without rehearsing. Free to explain without over-justifying. Free to feel without filtering. Because your voice matters. Your clarity is a gift. And your thoughts are valid even if they're not approved by everyone. You were never meant to shrink to survive. You were meant to speak and be heard, to express without fear, and to trust your own truth again. That's not just healing, that's restoration. And restoration is your birthright. Over-apologizing is one of the most overlooked yet powerful signs of deep emotional abuse, especially in those who have suffered at the hands of a narcissist. When someone constantly says sorry for things they didn't do, or for things that don't require an apology, it's not about manners or humility, it's about survival. It's about a person who has been trained not taught to believe that their existence is an inconvenience, that their words are too loud, their presence too much, and their opinions too offensive. Over-apologizing is not just a habit, it is the echo of fear that still lives in their nervous system. When a narcissist enters your life, they don't just control what you do, they control how you feel about what you do. They manipulate you into thinking that everything is your fault. If they're angry, it's because you said something wrong. If they cheat, it's because you weren't loving enough. If they disappear, it's because you're too clingy. Over time, you begin to internalize that everything is somehow you're doing, even if you can't quite explain how. So what happens? You begin to apologize preemptively, constantly, and unnecessarily. You apologize when someone bumps into you. You say sorry when you express a need. You even apologize when someone else is in the wrong, just to keep the peace. Why? Because you've been conditioned to believe that conflict is dangerous, that expressing your truth might come with punishment, silence, or abandonment. You've learned to say sorry before the world accuses you of something, because living in a narcissist world meant guilt was your second skin. You weren't allowed to be human, you were required to be perfect, agreeable, silent, convenient. And when you're finally out of that relationship, the abuse doesn't stop, it just changes forms. You carry it into new relationships, new friendships, even into your career. Every time someone raises their voice, your heart races. Every time you make a mistake, you panic. Every time you're given a choice, you hesitate. Why? Because somewhere in your spirit, the memory of being wrong, even when you were right, is still alive. This over-apologizing isn't simply verbal. It's spiritual. It's emotional. It's a quiet way of asking the world for permission to exist. You're not just saying sorry for knocking over a glass. You're saying, please don't be mad at me. Please don't leave me. Please don't think less of me. That's what every over-apology really means. It's not about the moment. It's about the history behind it. But here's the truth. You are not guilty for breathing. You are not guilty for having emotions. You are not guilty for making mistakes. You are not guilty for being you. And you should never have to shrink yourself to avoid someone else's rage. That is not love. That is not accountability. That is abuse disguised as dominance. That is emotional slavery pretending to be structure. But you are not bound anymore. Freedom starts with awareness. Begin by listening to your words. Pay attention to when you say sorry. Ask yourself, was that really necessary? Did I actually do something wrong? Or am I apologizing for existing? And when you catch yourself in that moment, don't shame yourself, bless yourself. Gently correct it. Replace sorry with thank you. Instead of saying, sorry, I'm late, say thank you for. Waiting. Instead of sorry, I asked a question, say thank you for helping me understand. It may feel awkward at first, even rebellious. But it is not rebellion, it is restoration. You were never meant to live under someone's emotional thumb. You were not created to apologize for your voice, your needs, your questions, or your presence. You are worthy of taking up space, of being heard without punishment, of being imperfect without fear. The person who made you feel otherwise was not leading you, they were controlling you. And the good news is that control no longer defines you. Healing from over-apologizing is not about never saying sorry, it's about knowing when it's healthy and when it's harmful. It's about reconnecting with your right to be human, your right to be misunderstood without fear, your right to stand firm without guilt. You can still be kind without being submissive. You can still be humble without being invisible. You can still walk in grace without crawling in shame. So stand up, not in defiance, but in dignity. Pay attention to your words because they reveal your wounds. But more than that, they reveal your growth. One day you'll find yourself holding back an unnecessary sorry end. In that moment, know that your healing has taken root. Your journey is not about perfection, it's about permission. Permission to be whole. Permission to be free, permission to speak, to feel, to grow, and to never again apologize for existing. You don't owe anyone an apology. For being who God created you to be. Not anymore. When a person has been emotionally wounded by a narcissist, their body learns to communicate in silence. It adapts, adjusts, and builds invisible shields that show up in the smallest, subtlest ways. Guarded body language is one of those quiet, unspoken shields. You might see someone cross their arms tightly in a room full of friendly faces. You might notice how they sit at the edge of their seat, ready to flee at a moment's notice. You might watch them avoid eye contact, look down, or lean away slightly when someone gets too close. Most people see this and think they're just shy or they must be antisocial. But what you're really witnessing is a body still protecting itself from battles it barely survived. You see, when someone has endured narcissistic abuse, Their entire nervous system becomes wired for defense, not against strangers, but against emotional violation. Guarded posture becomes an unconscious habit. Why? Because they were once in a relationship where being open led to being attacked, where vulnerability became ammunition, where every time they relaxed, they were met with manipulation, cruelty, or gaslighting. So now, even in peace, the body remains in posture for war. The arms cross not because they are cold, but because it's the safest way to hold oneself when they don't feel safe with others. The eyes dart away not because of disrespect, but because making direct eye contact once invited scrutiny and control. The shoulders hunch not from poor posture, but from the weight of criticism, judgment, and shame that was placed on them for years. These are not mere gestures, they are coded memories. And those memories haven't faded. They've just found new ways to live through the body. What's powerful is that most people who carry this guarded language don't even know they're doing it. They walk into a room, fold their arms, keep their expressions neutral, and wonder why they feel disconnected. They want to engage, but the mind says connect, while the body says protect. This internal tug of war becomes exhausting. It's like wanting to hug someone, but feeling like you'll break in the process. Wanting to speak up, but fearing the backlash of doing so. Guarded body language is not rebellion, it's survival. There are people today who never raise their voices, not because they lack passion, but because they were punished for expressing themselves. There are people who sit in the corner of gatherings, not because they're uninterested, but because they were trained to believe their presence is a problem. There are people who always take the seat closest to the exit, not for convenience, but because being trapped once meant enduring something unbearable. So now, even freedom feels risky unless there's a plan to escape. But healing comes when we begin to notice these patterns and treat them with grace, not guilt. Healing is not forcing yourself to smile more or open your arms wider. Healing is gently asking yourself, what am I still afraid of? And where did I learn that I needed to hide? Because these gestures are not personality traits, they are survival mechanisms. And survival doesn't have to be your permanent state. You weren't made to hide behind your posture. You weren't created to shrink in rooms where you belong. You weren't designed to fold inward while your spirit longs to reach outward. You were made to walk in confidence, not because everything has been perfect, but because you've survived imperfection and are learning how to live again. So if you see someone with guarded body language, offer them patience instead of pressure. If you see yourself in these patterns, offer yourself compassion instead of criticism. There is nothing wrong with you. There is only a story in your body that needs to be honored, understood, and slowly rewritten. Rewriting that story means learning that not everyone is a threat. It means practicing safety in small steps, relaxing your arms, lifting your head, letting your shoulders drop, breathing deeply in spaces where you used to hold your breath. It means showing your body that the war is over and peace has come to stay. And with each step toward healing, you'll notice something incredible. Your body will begin to speak a new language. A language of confidence, not caution. A language of openness, not defense. A language that says, I am here, I am safe, and I deserve to take up space. That's when you'll know you're not just surviving anymore. You're healing. You're growing. And the body that once trembled in defense is now standing in dignity. They often struggle with boundaries, not because they are weak, but because they were trained to believe their boundaries didn't matter. In a relationship with a narcissist, saying no came at a cost. It could be followed by silent treatment, explosive anger, guilt tripping, or subtle punishment. Over time, the abused individual learns that their voice is a liability and their needs are a burden. So they begin to shrink their own voice, to silence their own discomfort, and to give others permission to cross emotional, mental, even physical lines just to keep the peace. This struggle with boundaries becomes deeply ingrained. It shows up in the way they tolerate disrespect, in the way they allow others to dominate conversations, make decisions for them, or take advantage of their time and energy. You might see them freeze when it's time to speak up. You may notice how they try to soften their words, dilute their truth, or coat every disagreement with layers of apology. They are not indecisive by nature. They've been programmed to believe that asserting themselves equals rejection. Their struggle isn't with clarity, it's with courage that was once punished. Somewhere along the line, the narcissist made them feel that disagreeing was betrayal, that expressing an independent thought was a challenge to authority, that saying no was a form of abandonment. So now, even simple acts like declining an invitation or asking for space can trigger deep internal conflict. Their minds replay past consequences like warning bells, and their bodies tense as if bracing for backlash that isn't even coming. They often say yes when their heart is screaming no. They lend their time when they're exhausted. They say nothing when someone hurts them. And this isn't because they lack strength, it's because their strength was never honored. It was twisted into rebellion. They were taught that having limits made them selfish, that asking for respect was an act of defiance. But the truth is, boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries are the evidence of self-worth. They say, I matter. They declare my space is sacred. But when that worth has been stripped, blurred, or distorted by manipulation, the very idea of protecting oneself can feel foreign, even wrong. And this is why healing must involve reclaiming boundaries. Not with aggression, not with bitterness, but with clarity and conviction. It begins with learning that it's not only okay to say no, it's necessary. It's a survival skill in a world that often demands more than we can give. It's a form of love not just for self, but for others. Because boundaries allow relationships to be healthy, honest, and balanced. Without them, resentment festers, identity dissolves, and silence becomes a prison. People who have been abused by narcissists don't just need time to heal, they need space to rediscover their edges. They need to practice speaking up without apologizing for existing. They need to see that setting a boundary doesn't push people away, it filters out the ones who were never meant to stay. And it welcomes those who are mature enough to honor the dignity of others. The journey back to healthy boundaries isn't easy. There will be moments of guilt. Times when the abused person second guesses themselves. When they wonder, am I being too harsh? Am I becoming like the narcissist? But they are not. They are doing the hard, holy work of self-respect. They are learning that protecting their peace is not a betrayal of love, it's an act of wisdom. Because love without boundaries is not love, it's control. And the abused have lived under enough control to know the damage it causes. Sometimes it starts with the smallest steps. Choosing not to answer a late night call. Declining a favor that feels too heavy. Speaking up when someone crosses a line. And each of these small acts adds a brick to the wall of self-protection, not a wall that isolates, but a wall that defines. That says, this is where I end, and someone else begins. Over time, those who once feared conflict begin to find strength in their no. They discover that the world doesn't end when they assert themselves. That true friends respect their limits. That peace doesn't come from pleasing everyone, it comes from aligning with truth. They realize that boundaries don't break relationships, they are not the relationship. Reveal them, and they find that in the sacred space of saying enough, healing begins to flourish. Because you were not made to be a doormat. You were made to stand, to speak, to shine. And your voice, your space, your truth, it all matters. You don't need permission to protect yourself. You don't need approval to guard your peace. You only need to believe that you are worth the respect you so freely give others. And you are. You always have been. Boundaries aren't barriers, they are bridges back to your dignity, your identity, and your destiny. Walk boldly in them. Laughter is a universal language. It's meant to express joy, ease, and connection. But when someone has been abused by a narcissist, laughter can become a mask. It can become a twisted survival mechanism, something used not to express happiness, but to shield pain, to protect identity, and to navigate emotional landmines. This kind of laughter doesn't come from the soul, it erupts from fear, from anxiety, from years of being trained to appease, entertain, and de-escalate. When a person laughs during serious moments, chuckles while talking about something painful, or smiles during confrontation, they are experiencing strong emotions. Most people assume they're just nervous or quirky. But what they don't realize is that this is a person whose nervous system has been rewired by trauma. They have learned deep in their bones that showing discomfort, showing disagreement, or showing truth could lead to rejection, punishment, or mockery. So instead of speaking, we can communicate through writing. Plainly, they laugh. Instead of confronting, they giggle. Instead of crying, they joke. The narcissist made them feel that their feelings were dangerous, that their pain was exaggerated, that their complaints were drama. So they learned that if they want to be taken seriously, they must not be serious. If they want to be loved, they must be entertaining. If they want to survive, they must not make anyone uncomfortable. Even if it costs them their authenticity, even if it silences their truth, even if it burns them inside out. That is the power of misplaced laughter. It seems harmless, even cute on the surface. But beneath it lies a history of not being believed, not being protected, and not being loved for who they really are. Beneath it lies a pattern of shrinking, of minimizing their own reality so others won't be offended. And what makes this so dangerous is that the person doing it often doesn't even realize it. They don't know they're laughing to avoid pain. They don't see how they're using humor to deflect vulnerability. It's become second nature, a reflex, a shield. But just because it's normal doesn't mean it's healthy. Just because it helped them survive the narcissist doesn't mean it will help them thrive in freedom. What helped you in captivity can hinder you in liberty. The coping mechanism that protected you in the storm can suffocate you in the sunlight. You see, when you no longer have to entertain someone to feel safe, but your body still acts like you do, that's a prison of the mind. When your soul wants to cry but your mouth still smiles, that's emotional dissonance. And healing requires that the inside and outside begin to match again. That your body learns it is now safe to stop performing. That your soul is now free to express truth without fear of punishment. But to get there, you must confront this behavior. Not with shame, not with guilt, but with grace and awareness. You must catch yourself when you laugh and ask, what am I really feeling? You must sit with your discomfort and say, do I need to joke right now, or do I need to be honest? You must retrain your nervous system to know that disagreement doesn't mean danger, that pain doesn't need to be decorated, that your truth doesn't need to be sugar-coated to be accepted. You have a right to speak plainly. You have a right to feel deeply. You have a right to say that hurt without laughing to make others comfortable. Because healing is not about making others at ease, it's about making yourself whole. Many survivors of narcissistic abuse struggle to find their voice again because their voice was used against them. So they whisper, they chuckle, they tiptoe. But God did not design you to be muted by manipulation. He designed you to speak with clarity, with conviction, and with courage. Your voice matters not just what you say, but how you say it. And when your voice aligns with your truth, you walk in power. When your reactions match your reality, you walk in wholeness. You don't need to perform. You don't need to make light of things that broke you. You don't need to smile through suffering. You are allowed to be honest now. You are allowed to feel safe in silence. You are allowed to say, I'm not okay, without having to soften the blow with a joke. You are not here to entertain people. You are here to live, to heal, to grow, and to be seen for who you truly are. So, the next time that nervous laugh tries to rise in your throat, pause. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, what do I really need right now? That pause is where healing begins. That pause is where your freedom lives. And in that pause, you will find your true voice, the one that no narcissist could ever steal.